Pope from Corriere Canadese on behalf of Corcan Media Group and Go Live TV. Today we're going to resume our discussion about immigration, the difference between law and reality. And with us is Richard Borax, immigration lawyer. I want to play a little bit of a tape before we go forward.
Go ahead.
Children, immigration, chaos, fear and division. I think we have a quick little video. Can we go to that first, please?
The reason we're here today is because I know that you're legally here in Canada. You're an immigrant now. Congratulations. You're on the path to being kicked out of the country.
Yeah.
Do you remember the times you became legal?
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
Well, the day that we became legal in Canada, I was like so happy.
Why?
It's very nice because like Canada is where I live, you know.
Oh, this is your buddy here. What shape is he in now, legally?
Well, I don't really agree on what is happening with him.
What is happening with him?
Because he's getting deported and he has another sibling,
Yeah.
and they're still kids, you know. Their first language is English.
You want to stay here?
Yes,
Why?
I do. Because I think this is a better country than all of them. And the learning is good too. I learned a lot of stuff.
The school you go to here in Toronto, do you know if there's any other kids in your position?
Yeah, I've seen a kid that I think he got deported.
Do you ever cry about going back?
Yes,
Your parents want to go back?
I want to stay here.
Listen, if you were allowed to stay here, what would you like to do with yourself? What do you want to be?
I want to be a computer programmer because I think that's the future.
How about you?
I want to be a TV producer as well as a programmer.
Really, eh? Why would you say that?
Because I think that what you can do with the TV, you can unite the community, you can help the community, and as well as programming, because programming is the next step to the future.
Look, when you see these kids being kicked out of the country, you remember your own past. What do you feel?
I feel that the minister should have more mercy for the kids in Canada who are going to be the future in Canada, who's going to help Canada. Like, and any other kid could be being deported right now, but they could be the next best doctor in Canada, the next best lawyer in Canada.
What about your sister? What does she want? Do you know what she wanted? What's she going towards? What's she like?
She's going to be a police officer.
A police officer? Your sister wants to be a cop.
Yes.
Oh my God, that's if they don't kick her out, right?
Yeah.
So if the cops don't kick her out, she wants to be a cop, yeah? Why is that? How is she thinking?
She's a superhero.
She's a superhero?
Yes.
So there you have it, Richard.
Yep.
Thank you very much for doing that
Sure.
little bit of an interview with those young kids. They're remarkably conversant. Now, we talked about this before,
Yep.
and what we said is that this whole issue about doing things that are important in the kids' best interest. So there's a Supreme Court decision. We did this 2 shows ago.
Sure.
Supreme Court decision said you must always make decisions in the best interest of the child.
Yep.
So what I wanted to do is when I see that, I say to you, okay, so what's the root of the problem? Why is it that we can't take that video with those children and their dreams, sounds
Yeah.
like Trump, and their dreams and say, you have a right to fulfill them
You
here.
know, Joe, in this country, every public policy, one way or the other, goes back to 1867. Fernando, we're going to have the graphic. It all goes back to 1867 when the Fathers of Confederation got together and they divided up the pie. And what they said in 1867 was that immigration is shared, but immigration enforcement belongs to the feds in Ottawa, but education is provincial.
So just for simple people like me, that means the federal government decides who comes in,
Yep,
gives them status,
yep,
allows them to stay.
yep.
And if they don't like them, for whatever reason, the federal government has the right to send them away.
That's right.
Now, I know, even though I'm a simple mind, that immigration is a shared responsibility with
Yep.
the provinces.
Yep.
So here in Ontario, What's Ontario's role?
Well, Ontario, if it had the will, comes down to simple will. If Ontario had the will to say to Ottawa, you know what, we want to find a way that these kids will become legal immigrants, then Ottawa cannot give them the boot. Because if Ontario can go to Ottawa and say, here's how we want these kids and their parents to stay here as construction workers, as trade workers, as whatever. And if Ontario had the will to say, these kids will stay for this reason, then Ottawa can't give them the boot under the Constitution.
But under the Constitution, you just said a moment ago, the provinces have total responsibility over education.
That's right.
And under the Education Act,
Yep.
Ontario in this instance,
Yep.
the Ontario Education Act says that if a child is a minor, under 18,
Yep.
they are obliged to be in school. And no school board is allowed to kick them out. Does that mean that the government of Ontario, in this instance,
Sure.
essentially saying to the government of Canada, we don't care what your rules are?
You know, Joe, it goes further than that. The Education Act in Ontario, Section 49(1), specifically says that persons unlawfully in Canada, if you're under 18, you go to school. And yeah, and that's in direct contravention of what Ottawa says, that if you don't have our permission to go to school, i.e. federal permission, you can't go to school. So we
So
have...
which law supersedes the other?
This is Canada. This is Canada. The only way to find that out is that you go to the Supreme Court.
We've already gone to the Supreme
Well,
Court. We
and-
mentioned this in a couple of
Yeah,
shows ago.
sure.
Supreme Court said you've got to do what's in the best interest of the child. What's in the best interest of the child? Obeying the federal law or abiding by the provincial law?
bottom line problem here is, now Joe, you were in cabinet, you put your hand on the Bible and you swore to uphold Her Majesty's laws. And what we have in the immigration sector is that ministers get in there, governments get in there, and they simply ignore their oath to uphold the law. And they just, everybody looks for a matter of convenience skating around the law.
But the law for the federal minister says if somebody's in contravention of that act, the
Sure.
Immigration Act in
Yep.
this instance, they are liable, number one, for removal.
Yep.
And if you help somebody who's liable for removal,
That's right.
you counsel them, you don't advise them, you encourage them directly or indirectly, that you are liable to be charged.
Joe, starting from the minute you were in the education system, any principal, any education official who counsels, and there's tens of thousands, 60, 80,000 kids going to school in Ontario, and they're being counseled by teachers, by administrators, by superintendents, by the minister. And that is an offense under the Immigration Act. The maximum penalty under Section 125 of the Immigration Act is, starting from the minister on down, two principals, is $50,000
For every offense.
For every offense, to imprisonment for a term of not more than 2 years.
For every offense.
For every
Now,
offense.
if you just think about that for a moment, and I know there are a lot of people watching this are saying, I don't know whether these people know what they're talking about or not. But under Section 91 of the Constitution Act, the BNA Act
Sure.
initially, education is the exclusive responsibility of the province.
That's right.
What you're telling me
Sure.
and everybody who's watching
That's right.
is that if the Minister of Education, and therefore her government, allows for those children, the children of those who are, I call them visa overstays, to go to
Well,
school.
I call them illegal. That's what they are.
Well, you can call them whatever you like, but the fact of the matter is...
You're sugarcoating it, Joe.
No, I'm
Honest
not
to God.
sugarcoating. The fact of the matter is they're here.
Yeah.
So once they're here, they have the same rights as anybody else who sets foot on Canadian soil.
No,
What you're
they
telling-
don't.
Well, unless it's contested otherwise,
Okay.
and proven otherwise, they have all the rights.
To go to school
Well, they have the right to go to school in Ontario.
in Ontario.
And the Minister of Education, acting on behalf of his or her government, in this case it's her government,
Sure.
by and making sure that every child attends school, and I think she's right, is essentially in contravention of the Immigration Act federally.
Absolutely. They're all, if you and I counseled kids to go to school illegally, and you were a school administrator for quite a few years.
I used to make sure the kids went to school.
Well, then you go to jail for 2 years, Joe.
Well, I don't mind doing that. I think I'm doing the right thing.
Well,
making sure that kids go to
you know,
school,
I
get an
am si-
education,
I am sick and-
become good citizens.
Does the word rule of law ring a bell?
Yes.
Ding.
I was obeying the rule of law under Section 91.
Well, yada-da, you know, you're still breaking the Federal Immigration Act, period.
So we make decisions in life.
We make decisions. Now, as I recall, you were in Ottawa, and perhaps we can,
No, just a moment.
Okay.
Just before we go on,
Okay,
because
okay,
there's
okay.
another thing that's coming up.
what do you mean we make decisions? You're in public life, you're sworn to uphold the law. You don't make decisions outside of the law.
So now,
You go to jail for that.
Well, all right. So you're telling me that if the federal minister doesn't enforce his own legislation, he is in contravention of that same law.
Absolutely. What, was this rocket science?
I don't know. Has this been tested in court?
A minister is obliged. How many times have courts held that the minister is there? Mandamus actions are there. You can force the minister to follow the law. Absolutely.
You can force the minister to follow the law with a mandamus action, which means that, essentially the public says you are in, you are not fulfilling your obligation.
And because nobody has gone to court and say, Minister, go arrest that school principal.
But that's actually happened.
Mr. Hussein, please go arrest that provincial minister.
But hold on, that's actually happened, because I recall it was, 12 years ago? And I think we might actually have a video where people went into a school, not too far away from the studio,
Yeah.
Dante Alighieri
Dante
Academy.
Alighieri, that's right.
And they moved in there
Yep.
to take kids out of the school, to follow them home so that they could catch their
And
parents.
those two immigration police officers were doing their job, Joe. And as I recall, you got the phone call from the principal at Dante Alighieri. I was involved in that, by the way. And the teacher, the principal, did her job under the Provincial Act, and those two immigration cops did their job under their act.
So
That's
if it-
called chaos, Joe.
If I'd have been the principal, you know what I would have done?
I know you were taking a baseball bat to somebody's head.
Well, no, I would have asked somebody else to come in and arrest those immigration enforcement
Well,
officers
you're
for
dead
harassing
wrong.
kids.
You are dead wrong. They're doing their
Supreme
job.
Court has just agreed
Oh,
with
come
me.
on. Supreme Court agreed specifically that those kids can't be kicked out.
That's right.
Uh,
So if they can't be kicked out, what are you doing harassing them in the
Why
classroom?
are you ignoring the law? You were sworn to uphold the law, not ignore
I told
it.
you that I was going to be a principal. If I was a principal, that's
Uh,
exactly what I'd do. I'm
Oh,
looking after the
you're
kids'
a
best
principal,
interest.
So you're because you're a principal, you can ignore the Federal Immigration Act. Well, so I can ignore. We can all ignore the Federal Immigration Act.
Well, I
How's
think
that
the
sound?
principal is responsible to the board and to the ministry and to
He's
the provincial
responsible
government.
to Her Majesty the Queen.
No,
And
he's
the-
responsible to his board. The board makes a decision. You and I talked about this already. The school board gets $12,300 for every one of those kids that come in. The moment they accept the money from the provincial government,
Under federal law, that's all money laundering. It's illegal.
well, I think this is an interesting type of a debate, because the federal government hasn't enforced its own laws against the people who are breaking it.
Surprise, surprise.
Well,
the
no.
immigration minister is not enforcing the law.
Well,
That's what this immigration
Against
policy is
whom
all
would they?
about.
Against whom should they enforce the law?
The
Should it
province.
be against the kids, against the school board, or against the province?
Under the law, all of the above.
Well, there hasn't been anybody who has taken action against any of those three entities in jurisdiction.
And that is the core. That's why it's called chaos.
Yes, but we're back to the central theme here. It's children, the reality of the law, and the chaos that ensues.
And for me, the central theme is that the Fathers of Confederation in 1867 well knew that the central government doesn't really know what's happening. That's why you give it the education to young children, you give it to the province.
Why should I obey the law of somebody who doesn't know what's happening?
Well, Joe, it's called the rule of law.
Well,
You put your hand on the Bible and you swear that you're going to uphold Her Majesty's laws. You can't just pick and choose and say, oh, well, I don't like this law, la-di-da.
no, if you don't like the law, you change it.
Very good. But
Okay, if you don't like the law, you change it. That having been said, the federal government has authority to give status and to remove people.
That's
In
right.
fact, it has an obligation.
Yep.
It has an obligation to remove people that are in contravention of the law. There is no minor who is in contravention of the law. And the Supreme Court agreed with that. The Supreme Court interprets the constitutional jurisdictions of all of the entities, whether they are federal or provincial or municipal. It eventually ends up at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court says every decision must be taken in the best interest of the child.
Yeah, you're right. They said that with regard to removal, not removal. I see what you're doing. You're taking that principle and applying it to every aspect of the immigration process. And frankly, you're making a lot of sense with that.
Oh, good. Thank
But-
you.
But just because it's sense doesn't mean it's the law.
Well, no, look, the law is not only what's written, and you know this, it's not only what's written, but it's also the precedents that have been set and abided by and contested in
And-
court.
And right again, and this is, but unfortunately, because Ottawa is so married to the concept of chaos in breaking the law in the immigration process, if their feet isn't put to the fire by the provinces and by the community, nothing's going to change, and these kids will continue suffering. Now, the means exists. Like you say, the Supreme Court decision that no kid can suffer harm, it would be nice if that attitude was put to this process. Because in a sense, that's what the province has said. But and I agree with that, but you also have to agree that that's not happening.
No, you know what's not happening, Richard, with all due respect. What's not happening is people aren't using the appropriate discretion that's given to them under the law. So the minister has the discretion,
That's
the
right.
authority to either grant status, to take a look at conditions, and to say under humanitarian and compassionate
And why
grounds,
aren't-
we should be doing this.
That's called common sense.
Oh, it's called, you're going into office, you're going there with a specific purpose, to get something accomplished. Whether it is to reinforce the law, to change the law, or to make sure that the
when
process...
you were in Ottawa and these police officers walked into Dante Alighieri School, I remember you freaked.
Well, they were enforcement officers for immigration. I
Okay.
would have called the local police and asked them to get these guys out of the room.
And I recall you freaked. And the
Well,
kids...
I'm doing that now.
And God bless you. Now you tell me, why isn't Ahmed Hussein freaking? That these
I don't
kids...
know. We'll
that
ask
these
him.
kids-
We'll ask him to come here and explain that question himself.
Okay.
In the meantime, you know what? I think we're almost out of time, and if you don't mind, we can continue this on our next issue.
Okay, great.
Because I think we haven't exhausted the whole business of the law and the reality, and we haven't talked about the accountability that comes with utilizing public money because you apply one law as opposed to the
And
other.
the amount of money, the billions
Well-
and billions that are wasted.
So they're not wasted. You see, I think that the money that's spent on children is an investment.
Now, when you kick
What-
them out, that's the waste.
Well, that's the waste. So that comes back to what I just said a moment
Yeah,
ago:
yeah.
is which of the two laws does it make most sense to abide by?
The
If
provincial
I'd have been a principal in that school, I would have called the local police and asked these people to get the enforcement officers out of my school because they're harassing children. Now, that's what I would have done as a principal. I didn't get a chance to say that because I wasn't the
But you
minister
were
anymore.
But you were the minister.
But I wasn't a minister at that
But
instance.
you were later, and you didn't change it
No, that was before.
before?
Yeah, so I
Okay.
was a minister before that happened. And so there was a question of discretion. And my issue has always been, for all immigration all immigration officials, you're acting on behalf of the minister. If you can't think in terms of what my views are as a minister, and I'm representing the government of the day, then I think you've got to look for another job. And the government of the day is not only for upholding the Constitution, it's there for improving it as we go along.
But Joe,
The
how can, you
government
say,
again-
Joe, how can you say that to those two immigration cops?
They're following somebody else's order. They weren't following
What do you mean
mine.
orders? So your orders are above the law? I don't understand this.
The minister has the power of discretion to interpret the
Oh.
law. You know, we've talked about
Well,
this
of course
before.
they do, but why not just change the law?
That's a good point.
But it's-
That's something that we're going to talk
Okay.
later on. You can see that this is exciting. And so you have a lawyer who's taking the side of the government on one hand, then he takes the side of the offended party on the other hand, and then you have a simple person who's a publisher who thinks that right is right all of the time. So we'll see if right is right the next time around. We're going to do another one of these shows, you promise.
Absolutely.
Okay, so he promises to do that. We're going to talk about all the finances and the numbers that come into play when we talk about immigration and people as an investment rather than anything else. Are you game for that?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much, Joe Volpe, for Corcan Media Group and for Go Live TV. Until the next time. Thank you, Mr. Borax,
Sir.
and thank you, everybody, for watching.